So if you are interested in polymers and how the polymers behave at the interface, uh, please look into it. And if you are interested, just have a look. So first thing is our nature. So on Earth, we have a large scales in nature. If you see in nature, we have a large creatures like in whales, which is the largest animal on the earth. And if we go, we can go to a minimum size up to the atomic scale. As we compare with the electromagnetic waves, we can see that from radio broadcasting to the gamma rays of in the meter scale. In general, normally in this talk, I am covering a small scale of nanomaterials. Normally below this region, below this visible range, we cannot visualize by our naked eye. However, if we go more than that, we can visualize by our naked eye. So in principle, in this talk, I'm going to talk about the world which we cannot visualize from our naked eye. So let's dive into it. Sorry? Yep. I hope you are listening or any problem?
Yes, we are listening.
Yeah, good. Good, thanks. So how small is the nano world? So first thing is 1 nanometer is equal to 10 to the power of minus 10 to the power of is 9 nanometers. So if you compare human hair, which is about 10 micrometer thick, so we can see that it is about 10,000 times greater than a nanometer. If you like to visualize it, you can visualize like as a whale, which is about 10 meter in length, and you can see that it is about 10,000 meters, 10,000 times more than an ant. So you can compare that how small is a nano world compared to our normal world. So why nanoscale? Why we have nanoscale? Well, at nanoscale, generally we have large surface to volume ratio. So when we reduce the size, we can get more and more surface to volume ratio. And because of that, more surface area is increased drastically at the nanoscale. And because of large surface area, it can provide a large or a high reactivity, which can be very much useful for chemical reactivity, catalysis, or adsorption kind of things. The second things are the quantum effects are dominant at the nanoscale, which we can compare is like that at the energy at the bulk, we see that the band gaps are normally merged energy levels. However, when we go to the atomic scales, the energy levels they split. In splitted nanoscale, normally the electrons or atoms they behave or the light interaction behaves differently. In general, the electron moves freely in the bulk. However, at electrons movement are restricted at the nanoscale, which gives different properties at the nanoscale. And these are very useful for conductivity, optical, magnetic, or many other chemical properties, which are quite affected by these. So these are the things the nanoscale can change. Let's see an example of gold, how gold behave at nanoscale. As we all love gold, which is quite expensive nowadays, which is quite a yellow color soft metal with a good electrical conductivity and melts at a really high temperature. And it has a low chemical reactivity and catalytic activity as a bulk. However, at a nanoscale, if we see that gold can give different color. Most of you maybe know in the research field, gold is heavily researched, that when we increase the nanometer size from 20 to 60 nanometer or more, you'll see that different changes in color. And this change in color is due to the particle size, which is less than the wavelength of incident light. And the electrons, maybe they behave differently and they reproduce these colors. And also many literature reports decrease in the melting point. Some reports drop up to the 100 degrees centigrade. And also, as we know that the bulk gold is low chemical reactive, but at a nanoscale, the gold nanoparticles are highly reactive and thoroughly used in catalysis reactions. Now, on what factors the properties of nanostructured material dependent? Normally, there are three things. There is shape and size of the material. Second thing, how the materials, how these nanoparticles are interacting with each other, how they are assembled. Third thing is their composition. What is the composition of nano materials and how they are interacting with other groups? These are the three things. In this talk, I am mostly concerned about two things: shape, size, assembly, and interaction of nanoparticles. The nano world has different shapes. We have spheres, rods, discs, nets, and lot of different shapes nanoparticles can be formed, which we will see in this lecture also. And these nanostructures can assemble in different forms also. They can assemble in fiber form, they can bundle, they can assemble as a rods in different assemblies, as a voids, mixtures, flats, and also porous nanostructures, nanomaterials. Let's have a look in how nature's world look like. This is one of the insect, and we see that the color of the insects, how nature beautifully get the color of the insect from the arrangement of small structures, nanoscale structures on the insect. When we see a magnifying, we will see that these are the small nanoscale structures, and when these nanoscale structures, the light affected from it, this reflected light gives the color of the insect. Similarly, if we say this Paulina fruit, this is one of the fruit, and we take one of the fruit from it, and we see enlarge it to up to 250 nanometers, we will see these small lines. And these small lines, because of the cellulose nanocrystals arrangement in chiral nematic structures. I will show you more in the detail how these lines, this gives the color. And when these lines are arranged in a certain way with this chiral nematic structure, the pitch of this line, the width of this line is proportional to the wavelength of light. And when the pitch is tailored, plus or minus, they can enlarge or less, you can get different colors. This is one of the how beautifully nature gives the color to these Paulina fruits because of the nanostructure arrangements. The same if we consider our bones. Our bones is made from a very 1.5 nanometer tropocollagen, which is the basic structure of our bone, which can merged and can hierarchically join each other and gives the final structure of bone. The strength of bone, which is the basic units, is coming from tropocollagen. So this, how in our body, beautifully the nanostructures made and gives the large structures. Again, then tree nanoworld. Tree is one of the beautiful thing on earth, the most abundant polymer on the earth. The polymer is in the tree is called cellulose. Our work in our department is mostly dedicated to this cellulose structure. We see that at the cellulose structure, at 1 nanometer, this is the polymer chain. And when it forms a 10 nanometer where you have cellulose crystalline and amorphous phase. These cellulose microfibrils, they align together to make cellulose macrofibers, which microfibers and then gives the strong structure of a tree. We will have hardwood, softwood. We have many things what we can make from these cellulose structures. So how cellulosic materials can be transformed? Normally from these trees, we can take this cellulose as a cellulose nanocrystal. This can easily be obtained by doing sulfuric acid treatment And then you can also gain these cellulose nanofibers, which is a nanoscale. And you can convert these materials, cellulose nanocrystal and nanofibers, into any kind of form like cellulose thin films, sheet, powder, foams, gel, suspension. You can use it. And you can tailor these properties. These are biodegradable, useful, and, and having a really very good high strength at the nanoscale. I will discuss more about it in the later on the talk. So now the question comes how these nanostructures are made by in labs or in industries. Normally there are two main methods approach. First is a top-down approach where you have big particle and you just by some methods you can just make them smaller by mechanical grinding, etching or something. And finally you do it, repeat the process in a way that you will get finally the nanoparticles. Another is bottom-up approach. In this approach, you have take a salt or something like that, you have atoms, and then you can growth of this by some different methods, mechanism, nucleation and growth, coalescence, clustering, and then finally you get the nanoparticles. So normally these are the two basic approach they use in lab to prepare nanoparticles. And these nanoparticles or nanostructures are thoroughly used also in many biomedical applications like as a biomaterials in bones, in our body, in polymer coated stents, in dental, tissue engineering, contact lens, drug delivery, and many more applications. So nanotechnology has drastically, significantly affected our technology and our life. So let's see how the magic happens at the nanoscale. I will, in a couple of slides, I will show you some of the examples from ancient times till modern times. First, this is Roman Ligurius cup from 14th century AD. This is a beautiful cup. So the beauty of this cup is when you shine a light from outside, it looks green. But when you shine a light from inside, it will looks red in color or pinkish color. Let's see this cup in more reality in the British Museum. A couple of years ago, I got a chance to visit the museum, and you see that when the light is from outside, you see that this cup looks green. Now, when we move the light coming from inside, you see that it is now turning reddish or pinkish in color. Again, when we put the light from switch off the inside light and put outside, again it turns into green. So in that time, they know how to use nanotechnology. So now the researchers found that the color comes because of the silver and gold nanoparticles, alloys, with addition of 10% copper, which gives such a beautiful effect of coloring in these cups. Now the technology is what we are developing here, taking at the BioPriya. Let's see one of a movie scene from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Maybe some of you have watched this one. So you see that his name disappeared and the answer appeared. So we use the same technology and let's see if we can use it for blood typing. This is our glyph card. And let's see if we, in this glyph card, there are two screens. And if you put your blood on these two screens, one by one, and then after putting, if you wait for a minute and now put 40 drops of solvents, you will see that your blood group will appear. This glyph card and you will get your blood group in within a minute. So you need a very less amount of blood and you will get a very fast your blood group appeared on the screen, and it needs no electricity, no batteries, nothing. just simple visualization. And the principle is quite easy. It's just the simple antibodies and antigens which are printed on this screen on a cellulose paper, which gives this blood typing. So this is now commercialized from our department, from hemokinesis companies. And I guess it will be soon in the market. The second is what I showed you about, if you remember, the Polina fruit, where the nature gives the color. And where I told you about that how the nanocrystals give beautiful colors. Let's see how this can be reproduced in the lab. We have cellulose nanocrystals, and now we put some PEG in it. And the PEG will tailor the effect of what you call the pitch. And you see that with different concentration of PEG, you will see that the color is changing. In red color, the pitch is different. And when the amount of PEG is different, it turns into blue. This is simply the cellulose nanocrystal arrangement when they are drying in liquid. And they are changing the color. One is red, one is beautiful. One of my PhD student is working on this. This is from his project. Soon we are putting one publication on it. So what is the reason behind it? These are the cellulose nanocrystals. We took it from acid hydrolysis. And then these nanocrystal on drying, they arrange with each other in this hierarchical structure in a natural way. And then finally you get such a beautiful images. You see in these images different pitch sizes. And because of these different pitch sizes, you will get different color. You will get blue color, you will get red color. So these kind of films you can get, which is good for optical devices. Another technologies we are working on, one of my student from Laila Hussain, she is working on super adsorbent for biodegradable baby diapers. So we also use these cellulose nanofibers and we functionalize those surface by carboxyl groups. And then you will see that this is cellulose foam. We just freeze dry those hydrogels and then we got this foam. And if we put this foam in a water, it's so light, so thin, very less percentage of cellulose. And if you put it in water, you see that how much water it will absorb. It absorbs a very large amount of water. And this is a very useful for baby diapers, sanitary napkins, and also for meat packaging or any kind of packaging material where there is a liquid things. So normally, generally, we just publish an article in JCIS on it, if you are interested to look into it. So these kind of technologies we are developing here at our institute with cellulose nanocrystal and cellulose nanofibers. So in last couple of months, we are also interested in fighting, not interested, but we have our department which take initiative to fight against COVID-19. And so what, in collaboration with one of our home institutes, we developed some peptides in positive peptides in blood groups. And when we mix these peptides with positive patient plasma, we found that these peptides, they agglomerate the blood cells of the patient plasma. And when the agglomeration happens, you see that we get this positive signal. If a patient has a COVID-19, then we get this COVID-19 test. And when, if he do not have COVID-19, then these blood groups do not agglomerate. And when they do not agglomerate, they just accumulate at the beginning, at the end, which proves that the person has no COVID-19. This is just, we submitted an article now on to, this is our just a proof of concepts. We need to refine it more for further use. But this is just an initial initiative from our department. So now these, what I showed you up to now are how the nano world is affecting, how the technologies are developed by using nanotechnologies. In all these examples, nanotechnologies plays its part. And we'll see that how in lab we can develop and how we can do it in uh, the uh, different labs as well as in nature. So we can mimic the nature also. Now the question is how to visualize nano world, which is the topic of this talk. So to visualize nano world, we have three tools. Maybe I guess you basically knows from it. These are X-rays, neutrons, and electrons. The X-rays normally the electromagnetic waves, while the neutrons, electrons are particles. X-rays sees the electron density, while neutrons the neutron density, and they have their own advantages and disadvantages. When we use them as characterization tools, we need to know how they are penetrating the material. Normally, the neutrons has a large penetration, X-rays has less, and while electrons has very much less penetration. So according to the sample, we use different methods for different uses or characterization materials. So what methods? Normally, we use these tools in two different methods. One is microscopy. These are called direct methods where we can get electrons or X-rays. You can just shine on the material and then you get an image. And normally we know that the three most is optical scanning or transmission electron microscope. There is also one atomic force microscope, which I am not discussing here, but which also gives the enlarged microscopic image at the angstrom level. The another are scattering indirect methods, where you have X-rays or neutrons, which also interact with the samples, and they make this detector image, the scattering image, what I will discuss in later coming talks, in which we can extract information at the atomic and at the nanometer scale from indirect modeling or fitting of these data. So what length scale these methods work? Normally we have in microscopy, we have electron microscope, optical and atomic force. They can take from atomic scale to the large micro scale. However, in the scattering methods, we have dynamic light scattering, which can give from 1 to 1 millimeter of scale. And we have XRD, VAX, SAX, and USAX or USANS, which can gives up to micrometer scale length of nanostructures. So let's see how to visualize nano world by imaging. This is just the electron microscope, scanning and transmission electron microscope. So we see that the scanning electron microscope, maybe some of you are familiar with it, where you have electron gun, magnetic lenses, it pass through the electrons focused on the sample. We collect the secondary electrons and we make an image out of it. In the transmission electrons, we have the similar things, but the specimen, we use the transmitted electrons from the specimen, and then we get an image from those transmitted electrons. So the magnification of SEM or TEM, they are developing with many gadgets or improvement. They are now doing really very high resolution and have different advantages and disadvantages while making imaging and time consuming. So this is how scanning electron microscopes looks like. There are wrinkled silica nanoparticles with different morphologies. We have silver nanocubes, and also this is silica nanoparticles which are dispersed in cellulose fiber network. So these kind of images we can get it from scanning electron microscope to visualize the nanostructure in real world. Another one is transmission electron microscope, which can go further to the lower scale, or I can say in a more lower dimensions. It is at 100 nanometer or up to 10 nanometer. You can see that we have cellulose nanofibers, cellulose nanocrystals, gold nanorods, which we can see that in 5 nanometer, it looks quite large. And we have gold nanospheres at 100 and 10 nanometer. We can also see some planes, the arrangements in the planes. So we can see that these kind of beautiful images we can get in real world from electron and scanning electron microscope. So what electron microscopy do and what cannot? There is always some limitations to every characterization methods. So in electron microscope, we can do direct imaging, we can determine nanoparticles morphology, topography, we can there provide high resolution image, they have really high magnification, they are really good at it. But there are some limitations of them. The problem with microscopy is also this is a difficult sample preparation. While sample preparation, they can create artifacts which can mislead the information. In electron microscopy, we also need vacuum. There's a low pressure. When we need low pressure, we cannot measure the liquid samples like hydrogels. Well, there is a way people do it by freeze drying or cryo TEM, but if we want to track something in liquid form, it is difficult to track. Also, sample preparation and drying can mislead information. Maybe the agglomeration effect can affect, and which can see that can mislead the information. Also, in many that the charging effect, we need conductive samples. We do coatings, but sometimes after coatings also, we face a lot of problem with cellulose charging in making good images, which is quite time consuming. And these microscopy image, they are also localized to a particular area or give surface information. So sometimes or many times we cannot get information from a whole volume, which is a difficult task to get. So to overcome this, we can combine microscopy with scattering techniques. You already maybe knows from XRD from few of the lectures before, but here what I am discussing is at the small angle X-ray or neutron scatterings. So what is small angle X-ray scattering? This is a non-destructive analytical method. This is a part of the XRD, but at the smaller angles. So in SARCs or SANs, normally the X-rays or neutrons, they scattered from electron and neutron density distribution in the material. And what information we can get is about the size distribution of the particles. We can get information about shape, and we can also get information about interparticle interactions, how the particle are interaction in a whole bulk volume. We can also calculate the correlation length, volume fraction, and the number density of particle in over whole volume by small angle scattering methods. And what kind of samples we can measure? We can measure any kind of sample with the small angle scattering. We can make liquid sample, gels, foam, powder, sheets. Even by grazing incident, we can measure thin films. And also we can use different kind of materials, like we can use coal to check its porosity. We can use metals, we can use biomaterials, antibodies, proteins. We can use direct wood, bones, and ceramics, polymers. These all materials we can easily use or get scattering from in a small angle scattering. And the beauty of it is that it can be used to distinguish between both crystalline and amorphous material. Like in XRD, you can determine most of the crystalline material or the ordered thing, the amorphous material is different. While in small angle scattering, you can also determine the amorphous nanomaterials. So it is useful in that sense. So what is the principle? The principle is simple like any other scattering methods. There is X-rays, there is neutrons which interact with the sample, it interact with the electron and neutron density distribution, and it collected at the SARCs or VARCs detector. And with this at the detector, we will get a two-dimensional scattering image, which you can convert it into one-dimensional scattering curves. And these scattering curves, we can get different information. Like at the higher angles, as we know from Bragg equation, at the higher angles, the small angles, we will get this information about the colloidal dimension, while at the large angles, we will get information about the atomic dimension, what you get normally in XRD. There is an intermediate of, we also use at wax. We called it wax, which is normally used for polymer chains or glass ceramics arrangements like that. This is also at the atomic dimensions. So on what principle atomic small angle scattering works? This works on the principle of contrast. Maybe you remember this scene from our beautiful movie Dhoom 2. You see that this is the contrast effect. If you see a whole picture, you cannot separate. But when you see a contrast between eye and the background, you'll see that, okay, you can see the particles. On the same principle, small angle scattering works. When you have a contrast, when you have electron density difference or a neutron density difference, you can differentiate between the particle and rest of the matrix. But when you have no contrast difference, you cannot differentiate. The SARCs will not find it. So if a monster comes at your home, you can use this technique. See that intelligent wife, which has no contrast, it is saved from the monster, while the poor husband, which has a huge contrast, is just caught by the monster. So in a small angle scattering, you also have a form factor where you have these blue dots, and there is a interacting particle interaction where you see that between two particles. It's just a joke for fun. So how to visualize nano world by scattering image? So first thing what we get from scattering is this scattering images. So let's see how we can get some information from these scattering images. So how this scattering image looks like? The scattering image, in general, it looks like this. So we see that at the edges, this is the box. This is our higher angles. While close to the center, this is called beam stop, or near the beam stop, there is a SARC signals. The Bach signals gives the scattering, which gives how the structure inside the nanoparticles or the atomic dimensions, lattice, crystal lattice parameters, crystal size. While at the small angle, you will see a particle size, the whole dimension and their orientation. This is at the smaller angles, what you get from scattering images. So you can get a lot of information from scattering images itself. Let's see how. First, we have to know the difference between isotropic and anisotropic scattering. In a simple sense, when you have random particles, the isotropic scattering where it is scattered in all directions, you will get something like in scattering over all directions. And in anisotropic scattering, when you have oriented things, you will get a scattering in a particular direction, and which creates the information or the image in a particular direction or a particular direction scattering. So these are the two differences between isotropic and anisotropic scattering, which I am using in upcoming slides. Let's see how the scattering looks like from a random and oriented. So before, the random is this, and the oriented is like when they are organized in a particular fashion. These are random distributed nanocrystals. So you see that the scattering is coming like a circle, while when these nanocrystals are arranged in a particular order, you see that the scattering looks like some kind of a small spaces, which is highly intense, coming from the arrangement and rest of its background. How it looks like in more reality, in real-time measurements. These are the scattering from random and oriented rods. These randomly oriented rods, and these are at 100 nanometer, you will see that the oriented rod randomly. And also on the right hand side, you will see that the oriented rods from different direction. When you see from when the X-rays incident or from different direction, it gives different scattering images. So by looking at the scattering images, you can determine that what kind of orientation of your particles in your system you have. Either they are randomly oriented or they are oriented. Another example is ellipsoids. You can see that the ellipsoid which is randomly oriented, and these are the magnetic ellipsoids, and if you put some magnetic field, they are organized in a particular direction, and you see that the scattering image particularly shows the differences between them. One of the project which I did in PhD was the magnetic spherical core shell particle, which has a magnetic core and non-magnetic shell. So I did polarized neutron small angle scattering, and we find that on applying the magnetic field, when the field is on, you see that there is orientation of a circle. When it is off, it is randomly oriented. And when you subtract these images, you will get a magnetic field effect. These are the spherical particles. So by these scattering images, you can differentiate between magnetic core and non-magnetic shell kind of things. These are the cobalt nanorods which are assembled. So normally these rods, this is a TEM image. And when you put it in small angle neutron scattering, you see that when you visualize in different direction from the neutrons, you'll get different images. And when they are oriented in a magnetic field, you will see that they are oriented in a particular direction. So the scattering images tell about it. Another thing is when you want to determine the kinetics or you want to determine the dynamics, let's see how the things are forming. So let's see when the crystal, when the nanoparticles are growing and you want to track how they are growing. This is one of the beautiful example when the crystals, when the atoms are or nuclei are there, and when they start growing and forming a particular structure or particular arrangement of nanostructures. So in this way, you can determine this by scattering image, that's how the particles are growing. You can also determine if you have like cylindrical micelles and you want to see that how they align or how they travel in a microfluidics devices, which nowadays is a hot topic of work. When you have microfluidics and you determine that this is cylindrical micelles, you see that on your left hand side, you see that when the microfluidics at the point A, you will see that these are parallel. But when they are in point D, they are in perpendicular to the flow. And when they are again in point G, they are again parallel. So you see that how the scattering images are changing with their orientation. And when we take the third region in the bottom figure at figure C, you will see that how before it passed through a small area and how it is oriented after it passed through that area. So in this way, you can, by small angle X-ray scattering, you can determine how in a flow state some things is changing, how the flow is changing, the direction or the arrangement or the alignment of the nanostructure in a solution. Another example is on rotating, like when there is a polymer, how they are aligned on rotating magnetic field. So you see that, but in the beginning, they are randomly oriented, but when the magnetic field is rotating, they are oriented in a particular direction. So these are the things what we can get from a scattering image. But there are also like what scattering images can give and what cannot. The scattering images can give random and orientation of the structure. You can distinguish between what is isotropic and isotropic scattering. You can determine the kinetics, nanocrystallization or flow, some kind of things, how the nanostructures are traveling or they are in dynamic state. But what we have different shapes, what they have if we have polydispersity, what about the interaction without orientation? How we can differentiate those? Or when we have hierarchical structures, how we can know about that? So to go more further, we can use the scattering curves. So how to extract information from such scattering curves? Normally, when we have a scattering image, we do radial averaging or azimuthal averaging, or means we can average particular direction of these pixels and we get these scattering curves. Now, if these scattering curves, they give information about different shape. The slope of these curves, if we have a spherical shape, the slope will be different. When you have rod, the slope will be different. When you have disc, the slope will be different. Also, when you have different surfaces, if you have fractal surface, if you have a smooth surface, you can determine at the larger angles. And the shape of the curve you'll get from the smaller angle. So you can determine what shape you have and what sizes you have. Most of the time, normally the monodispersity comes in an ideal world, but most of the time the nanoparticles are polydispersed. They have different sizes. So the nanostructures, normally when you have monodispersed, when you have low polydispersity, you will get ripples in these scattering curves. But when the polydispersity increases, you will see that when the polydispersity, these ripples become more and more flat. And this gives information about that what is the polydispersity in your system. These are useful when you check the porosity or the polydispersity, the size distribution of your nanostructures in any kind of matrix. Now, when you have different sizes, when you have small sizes and when you have large sizes, in general, when you have scattering curves, when it goes towards the large size, the scattering curves shift towards the smaller angles, towards your left-hand side. And when they have a smaller size, they shift towards your right-hand side. So in this way, you can differentiate that your particles are growing or they are reducing in size. In this, you can compare. What when you have particles are interacting? When you have a non-interacting particles, the non-interacting particles, you will see the scattering curves, they are having ripples, or at the smaller angles, the slope is quite straight. But when you have interacting or dense particles, the slope goes down. It gives, you see the slope is going down and then it moves up because of the larger structures. So by this way, looking at these curves, you can determine, okay, there is a interaction or there is a interacting, the particles are interacting by some ways. What if you have hierarchical structure? When you have a hierarchical structure, what I mean with hierarchical structure, that they are growing. Like, let's say if you have a big structure, but it is made from a smaller structure. What I showed from the tree bones. Normally, these are the hierarchical structure where is a polymer which makes another group, which makes another group, and this group will make the stem or the bones like that. So when you have hierarchical structure, we see that is spherical particle, the green, the surface of the green particle is maybe smooth or rough, which we can see in this blue region. When we go toward this orange region, we can see the green particle, which is the particle shape. When these particles are interacting with other particles, we'll see that these are aggregates, which gives these interacting particles a small bump with the curves is going on. And when we go towards the larger size, this going towards up the blue region at the end. So in this way, we can, by scattering curves, we can determine how the particles are distributed in the curve, what are their shape, what are their surface, how they are interacting. These all are information we can get it from these small angle scattering curves. So these are the scattering curves, the things what you get from just by visualizing it. But you also want to take out the information from it. What size, the quantification. For quantification, you can model those curves. To model those curves, you can use a basic equation. which contains the size distribution, volume, form factor, and the structure factor. And this is the form factor for an example for a spherical particle which contains this contrast. When you have this contrast, you can visualize the particles. And by using this, you can model the curve like this. You can take the scattering curve. This is your experimental curve. You can create a model. You can use a particular form factor, size distribution like log normal or Gaussian. You can use a structure factor if you know that your particles are interacting. And you can also choose surface scattering, which you want. If your surface is fractal or non-fractal or smooth, you can use a forward slope and you can use a background and you can create a model. Then you can put your model on this. You can run some algorithm or loops. And then finally, when the curve is fitted, you can get the information about quantified information about what shape it has, size distribution, structure factor, volume fraction, number density, surface smoothness, all this information. So in this way, you can visualize the world of nanostructures. This is one of the examples, one of my work, which I did for silicon nanoparticles in cellulose matrix. These are the silicon nanoparticles which are small in shape, and then 8 nanometer, 22 and 74 nanometer, and there is a polymer which interacting with them. You see that when we increase the size, this hump is increasing towards the smaller angles. And also that the polydispersity, if you see that the polydispersity at the 8 nanometer is quite high, while at the 17 nanometer, we will see multiple ripples, which is from that the polydispersity is low. So in this way, you can distinguish. You can also determine what is on the core of the particle, what is on the shell of the particles. Here, the shell is the polymer, which is arranging these particles in a particular order. So finally, the conclusion. What are the takeaways? What you have from these? What you got from this talk? We learned that the nanotechnology has a significant effect on our life and in this world. And we know now that the nano world behave differently than the normal world. You can know that also by this virus, which is I guess 100 or 200 nanometer in size, which significantly affect a lot of things. So the material property generally changes at nanoscale world. We see that the color changes, we see that their property changes, they are more active, more interacting at the nano world, but they are also dangerous at nanoscale. There is a nanotoxicity which can affect a lot. So that's why normally the nanomaterials they need a matrix to use it in a particular fashion or in a particular way. So generally it is not recommended to use nanoparticles as in a nanoscale form. Always try to use it is in some matrix form. And we also know that we can visualize this nano world by combining electron microscope and a scattering method. We can determine their shape, size, their interactions, and many things by knowing these visualizing characterization methods. These are my acknowledgements from my institutes and my industry partners with whom I am working with here at the Monash in Germany. And many thanks for your kind attention, and thank you for staying with me for such a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vikram. There are some questions. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Akshay Kumar is asking what happens to the magnetic property the size of nanoparticles changes.
Well, the magnetic properties can be changed, can be different at the nanometer scale. We found that sometimes at the nanometer scale, what I did in glass ceramics, when we have nanoparticles, the big particles, they are not active as a nanoparticles, but when we have a non-magnetic shell, they behave differently. We normally use it for the MRI imaging, these, and we found that the magnetic properties, like you can use, you can tailor the properties as paramagnetic to other diamagnetic properties by controlling the size of the things. But it depends on different magnetic materials. It cannot be generalized for a specific magnetic material, but it can affect.
Praveen ji is asking, can we study materials in pico and femto size? Why do we stop in nano size?
Well, in principle, means like pico and nano. You can also do that, but I don't know. I don't know about like what characterization methods you use. Normally, people use it in a different way. Normally, we use in some different characterization method at synchrotron or neutron. They use some different methods, but I never deal with at these scales. Up to atomic scales you can do, but it's just the dimension. It's just a number, so you can determine. It's not a problem.
Dr. Madhul is asking how to distinguish from Sachs curve, whether at all there is any nanoparticle in the samples or it's just a continuous thin material.
I didn't get it. Can you please repeat?
How to distinguish from Sachs curve, whether at all there is any nanoparticles in the sample or it's just a continuous thin material.
Well, as I told you, as you saw this Doom video, you know that it depends on the contrast. If there is a continuous material, let's say if there is no contrast, if there is no electron density difference, then you will not get any scattering curve. You will get just a flat line. You will not get any information. But when you have a electron density difference, then you can get the ripples, these bumps in the structure, which can give you the information that, okay, there is electron density difference. So that's what you saw this cartoon where when there is no contrast, you cannot visualize by scattering images. It depends on, yeah, please go for the next one.
Dr. VSRS Praveen Kumar is asking how to determine the size of a nanoparticles using X-ray spectroscopy.
X-ray spectroscopy means like what kind of
There is continuation in another question. As it is known that Scherer formula will be used for determining the size, is any other way is there?
Well, there are many ways you can determine the size. Like normally people use X-ray scattering or dynamic light jets, just like dynamic light scattering. People can use dynamic DLS. So normally DLS track the Brownian motion, how the nanoparticles, they have Brownian motion in a suspension. But the problem with the DLS is that it needs very low concentration. Means you have to track the Brownian motion. If you increase the concentration, you will get false results in DLS. So, and by this way you can determine, and also like people use fluorescence microscopy to determine the shape of the nanoparticle in microscopy, or by just reflections fluorescence like that. But there are different ways you can choose.
Dr. S.K. Jain is asking, what are the challenges you find in your research work?
Oh, there are a lot of challenges I find. There are always challenges. And there is no solution. Like, you know, somebody said that there is no top. There are always challenges. And because while developing like these materials, we need a lot of uh, refinements, lot of thinking. We got a lot of failure before we get these things. Like my student, what I showed you, these beautiful color films, my student is working from last 2 years to get such arrangement. So mostly the challenge, first challenge is to determine the problem. When you determine the problem, then you have to, what approach you use. Most of the time you use some approach, and most of the time those all approaches fail. But The failure will teach you what approach is the right approach. So challenges are always there. So you have to first find a problem and then the approach. So there are two ways to find this. First is try all the approaches which you can fail with. So automatically you get the right approach, or try to get the right approach. Little bit confusing.
Dr. Archana Sharma is asking how much is the variation observed in these structural optical properties studies in a powdered nanoparticles and a palette made of the same nanoparticle.
Means which one in these gold nanoparticles? Or this is a little bit like a question which is difficult to answer because of different kind of like nanomaterials, like they can behave differently in liquid form and they can behave differently in the solid form. We also found that while making this photocatalytic activity of titanium dioxide, so in a liquid form titanium dioxide, we found that they are behave different. And when we disperse these nanoparticles in a cellulose matrix, and when we make this cellulose composite, flexible one, we found that they behave differently. So normally the property of nanoparticles, it depends on how they are dispersed in a matrix. Like if you make a pellet form and if agglomerate, then maybe the surface area will decrease. And maybe because of that surface area will decrease, you will get less activity. Or maybe when the agglomeration is quite big, when they are more than the wavelength of light, maybe you will not see the color. But when you keep the particles at the nanoscale, then like this, what the challenges is, what before question was came, what are the challenges? Like these are the challenges. Like when we disperse nanoparticle in cellulose matrix, we want that they will dispersed as individual particles. They will not agglomerate, so that we can get a high catalytic activity. But it is very difficult to get them because they agglomerate very fast. So it can be different.
Next one, the Dr. Anupam Salet is asking, can we determine the length of a nanorod, not size?
Yes, you can determine the length of the nanorod. The way is like normally the scattering curves. If you look at the scattering curves, you will see that you have a nanorod. But when you want to determine the length of the rod, you can just model it with a cylindrical rod. There is a form factor which you can easily use in SARS-FIT or SARS-VIEW kind of software, which are free. And then you can easily determine that, okay, you have a nanorod of this size. And also their polydispersity.
Yes, Upadhyay is asking, in its scattering, walks give a deep sharp peaks, whereas in SARCs give flat curve. Why?
Yeah, well, the thing is because in VAX or let's say in XRD, I show the VAX curve which is sharp peaks, which is just semantic, but normally in VAX, it is more like you will see a more atomic arrangement. The peaks are come when you have more atomic arrangement, when you have regular arrangement. And the regular arrangement will give the sharp peaks. But in SARCs, the nanoparticles, if they are arranged also in a systematic long order range, you will get a sharp peak. But in general, normally the nanoparticles are not arranged in a like in a crystal. They are like a little bit here and there, or like when you have like a liquid crystal kind of thing, they are here and there. That's why you see a bump kind of thing, not a sharp peak in scattering, because of the interaction behavior or their arrangements.
I'll take one last question. There are so many, but I'll take one last question from Abhijit Vyas, which is the most effective dispersion technique of dispersing nanoparticles in polymeric matrix?
Means, if I understand correctly, what is the most effective way to disperse nanoparticle in matrix, in a particular polymer matrix?
Yes.
Well, there are different ways. One of the challenges is this also, like normally there are different ways. What we are doing here is like we have cellulose nanofibers, we make it, and then we mix the nanoparticles with cellulose nanofiber in a like you mix in a mixer kind of thing, and then we just cast them. So this is one way. But now we are also trying to determine that we have a cellulose matrix, and now we are growing the nanoparticles inside the cellulose matrix so that we will get the dispersity. So we now got a good success in growing silica nanoparticles or silica